When I received that phone call from the florist, asking about the red roses and ceremonial arches for this Saturday, I knew my world was about to change forever. But I had no idea that by the end of that week, I would transform from an invisible old woman into someone who finally commanded the respect I had earned through 40 years of backbreaking labor. The betrayal hit me like a thunderbolt. 200 wedding invitations bearing my farm's address. 200 guests expected to arrive at my property for a ceremony I knew nothing about. My own son Marcus and his bride-to-be Rachel had orchestrated their entire wedding on my land without so much as a whisper of consultation. As if I were merely a piece of furniture in my own home. As if the 74 acres I had bled for belonged to them by birthright. I set the phone down with shaking hands and stared out at the rolling hills that had cost me everything to obtain. 40 years of scrubbing floors that weren't mine, washing clothes for families who barely acknowledged my existence, ironing shirts for men who couldn't be bothered to learn my name. 40 years of swallowing my pride while employers treated me worse than their household pets. Docking my wages for the smallest infractions, screaming at me for broken dishes while I bit my tongue and smiled through gritted teeth. Every dollar I saved had been a small victory against a world that seemed determined to keep me invisible. When I finally saw the newspaper advertisement for this place countryside estate, 74 acres, farmhouse included, the price seemed like an impossible dream. But something deep in my soul whispered that this was my moment. My chance to own something that could never be taken away. I worked double and triple shifts for 5 grueling years. Days cleaning wealthy homes where I was treated like a ghost. Nights scrubbing office buildings where security guards were my only company. My hands cracked and bled. My back screamed in agony. My feet swelled until I could barely walk. But every paycheck brought me closer to freedom, closer to dignity, closer to a place where I could finally rest without permission. The day I held the deed in my trembling fingers, tears streamed down my weathered cheeks. Elena Morales, sole proprietor. My name. My land. My sanctuary built from decades of sacrifice. This white farmhouse with its wraparound porch. These fruit trees I would plant with my own hands. This peaceful corner of the world where I could finally live without bowing to anyone. But for Marcus and Rachel, my farm had always been their personal playground. From the moment I moved in, they treated my property like their inheritance, arriving unannounced with crowds of friends, throwing parties that lasted until dawn, leaving empty bottles scattered across my lawn like confetti. And I, fool that I was, always cleaned up after them, always cooked for their unexpected guests, always swallowed my protests in the name of family harmony. "Mom, we're bringing some people over tonight," Rachel would announce, not ask. She'd lounge in my favorite chair like she owned the place, that sickeningly sweet smile plastered across her face. "Could you whip up some appetizers? More folks are coming than we expected." And I would shuffle to the kitchen like the unpaid servant they believed me to be, preparing food for strangers who never thanked me, washing dishes for people who didn't know my name. I told myself it was love. I convinced myself that this was how families bonded, that my sacrifices were building bridges between generations. How naive I was. How blind to the way they systematically exploited my generosity, year after year, until I became nothing more than their personal housekeeper. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was tending my tomato plants, enjoying the morning silence, when the first call shattered my peace. A professional voice, friendly and efficient, asking about event details for Saturday. "What event?" I stammered, my gardening gloves still dripping with water from the hose. "The matrimonial celebration for Mr. Marcus and Ms. Rachel," he replied cheerfully. "We have your address listed as the venue and need to coordinate delivery of round tables, chairs, linens, and the floral archway for 200 confirmed attendees." Ice water seemed to flood my veins. My legs buckled, forcing me to sink onto the porch steps before I collapsed entirely. My heart hammered so violently I feared it might burst right there. This couldn't be real. But deep in my bones I knew it was. That first call opened the floodgates to a week of torture. Caterers inquired about the 3-course menu. Musicians asked about sound system requirements and romantic playlists. Photographers confirmed timing for family portraits. Every vendor, every service provider, Every professional had the same information burned into their schedules. My address, my farm, my sacred space as the backdrop for a wedding I had never authorized. Each phone call felt like a dagger to my heart. How dare they? How could they plan the most important day of their lives on my property without a word of consultation? As if I were an old lamp in the corner, worthless and forgettable. By Wednesday afternoon, I couldn't bear the anguish any longer. I dialed Marcus with fingers trembling from righteous fury. "Son, we need to discuss something urgent," I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady. "What now, Mom? I'm swamped at work," he replied with that cold, dismissive tone that always made me feel like a burden. "It's about your wedding." The silence that followed confirmed my worst fears. "What does my wedding have to do with you?" he finally asked, his voice as frigid as winter wind. "Marcus, vendors keep calling me. You've listed my farm as your ceremony location." His response shattered what remained of my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Oh right, I meant to mention that. Don't stress about it, we're covering all expenses. Just have the house ready Saturday, and maybe prepare some food for family who stick around after. No big deal." No big deal. 40 years of sacrifice reduced to an afterthought. 200 strangers trampling my sanctuary treated like a minor inconvenience. 200 guests, Marcus, I whispered. "Come on, Mom, don't be dramatic. Maybe 150 tops. Look at the bright side, you'll finally meet Rachel's extended family." The bright side? As if hosting strangers in my private refuge was some kind of privilege. As if opening my home to people who didn't know I existed was a blessing. "What if I have other plans for Saturday?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "What plans could you possibly have, Mom? Your life is pretty quiet. Besides, this is important to us. It's our special day. Our special day. On my private property. Without my consent. Without my involvement in any decision." I hung up without another word. Tears poured down my weathered cheeks, not tears of sadness, but tears of rage so profound it burned like molten lava in my chest. They had crossed a line from which there could be no return. They had disrespected me in the cruelest way imaginable. But as I sat weeping in my kitchen, surrounded by the silence of my violated sanctuary, a brilliant idea began to bloom in my mind. An idea that made me smile through my tears. An idea that would teach them once and for all who truly own this land. Thursday morning, I called Sterling Premium Events, the most exclusive and expensive event planning company in the region. "Good morning, how may we assist you?" came the polished, professional response. "I need to book my estate for a corporate function this Saturday," I said with newfound confidence. "It's urgent, but I'll pay whatever rate necessary. This Saturday is extremely short notice, ma'am. Our corporate events typically require weeks of advance planning." "I'll pay triple your standard rate," I interrupted. "It's a 74-acre private estate with colonial architecture, manicured gardens, and parking for over 100 vehicles. Perfect for an executive retreat." Money speaks louder than excuses, and I could hear his tone shift immediately. "Could you provide more details about the function, Mrs. Morales?" "It's an exclusive corporate celebration for international executives. Maximum privacy and security required. No external interruptions whatsoever." The lie flowed from my lips with surprising ease. "Excellent. Could we visit this afternoon to assess the venue and finalize contracts?" "Absolutely. And one critical detail, you must arrive precisely at 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon for setup. Punctuality is essential." "No problem whatsoever, ma'am. It will be our pleasure to work with you." I replaced the phone and felt powerful for the first time in years. For the first time in decades, I felt like the master of my own destiny. They were about to learn, in the most humiliating way possible, that this farm had an owner, and her name was Elena Morales. I spent the remainder of the day cleaning every corner of my house with energy I hadn't felt in years. I pruned the roses, swept the porches, polished the floors until they gleamed like mirrors. If I was receiving Sterling to showcase my property, I wanted them to see exactly how magnificent and valuable my estate truly was. When Mr. Sterling arrived that afternoon with his assistant, his admiration was immediate and obvious. "Mrs. Morales, this property is absolutely breathtaking," he said as we toured the grounds. How long have you owned this estate? 5 years, I replied with pride. I worked 40 years to afford it. It's my most treasured possession. His eyes widened as he absorbed the true dimensions of the land, the immaculate house, the complete privacy. This is worth significantly more than you realize, he commented quietly. You could generate substantial income hosting exclusive events. Substantial income. Those words burned into my memory like fire. We signed the contract that very afternoon. $6,000 for a single day's rental. $6,000 that my son and daughter-in-law had never offered to contribute toward maintenance expenses, but which a professional company paid without hesitation for several hours' access to my property. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. I finally controlled the situation. I was finally going to demonstrate who commanded this house. But what I didn't realize was that this was merely the opening move in a war they had declared themselves. Friday morning brought a strange sensation in my chest. Not fear or anxiety, but something entirely different. Power. For the first time since purchasing the farm, for the first time in decades of being treated like hired help by my own family, I held absolute control over the situation. That feeling was intoxicating, like the finest wine ever tasted. I brewed strong coffee and settled on my porch to survey my kingdom because that's exactly what it was. My kingdom, my empire, my slice of paradise earned through blood and tears. The apple trees swayed gently in the morning breeze. The flowers I had planted with my own hands perfumed the air with sweet fragrance. The silence was so complete I could hear my own vengeful heart beating. The peace didn't last long. At 9 o'clock sharp, my phone exploded with the urgency of an emergency alarm. Rachel. From her first frantic syllable, I knew something was terribly wrong. Elena, I need to speak with you immediately, she shrieked without preamble. What's the matter, Rachel? I asked with calm I didn't feel internally. The florist just contacted me. He claims he can't access the farm tomorrow because there's another event scheduled. He says someone else reserved the venue for the same date. Her voice cracked between desperation and fury. That must be some mistake, Rachel. They probably confused addresses. It's not a mistake, Elena. The caterer and sound company called too. They all report the same thing. There's a corporate event scheduled from 2 in the afternoon. I could perfectly envision her panicked expression, her wide eyes, her pallor from shock. How is it possible you don't know about this? It's your farm. Exactly, Rachel. It's my farm. You're finally understanding. This must be a terrible misunderstanding, I replied with the most innocent voice I could muster. Have you spoken with Marcus? Perhaps he knows something. Of course I've spoken with him. He's driving over now. We'll be there within an hour to resolve this nightmare. I hung up and laughed alone in my kitchen. I laughed heartily, years of humiliation pouring from my throat in the form of liberating laughter. I should have been nervous about the confrontation approaching, but I felt nothing except deep, delicious satisfaction. An hour later, Marcus's car kicked up dust clouds on my driveway. Both of them emerged, my son and my daughter-in-law, wearing the most serious expressions I had ever witnessed. Marcus strode toward the house with determined steps like a general reclaiming lost territory. Rachel followed in heels that sank into my garden soil. Mom, what the hell is happening here? Marcus demanded without greeting me, marching into my house as if he owned it. I don't understand what you mean, son. Don't pretend ignorance. Every vendor reports there's another event tomorrow, a corporate function preventing them from setting up our wedding. I studied him, observing his gestures of desperation. It was the first time in years I had seen him genuinely concerned about something I could control. The first time he needed something from me beyond free food and housekeeping services. Oh yes, I finally said with the most natural voice possible. That's correct. I rented the farm for tomorrow. The silence that followed was so thick you could slice it with a blade. Marcus and Rachel stared at me as if I had confessed to murder. Their mouths fell open simultaneously. Their eyes filled with absolute disbelief. What did you say? Rachel whispered in a voice that seemed to emerge from beyond the grave. I said I rented my farm for a corporate event tomorrow, Saturday. I repeated with a smile I couldn't suppress. A very important company offered me considerable compensation to use the venue, and I accepted. But our wedding is tomorrow. Marcus exploded, his face crimson with rage. We sent 200 invitations. People have already confirmed attendance. Well, you should have consulted me before mailing invitations with my address, I replied with calmness that surprised me. This is my property, Marcus. Not yours, not Rachel's, not the family's. I decide what happens here and when. Rachel approached with eyes full of furious tears. Elena, you can't do this to us. It's our most important day. We've been planning this wedding for months. You've been planning, I repeated her words sarcastically. And at what point during those months did it occur to you to ask if I agreed? But you're his mother, she shouted, pointing at me like I was a criminal. Mothers are supposed to support their sons on their wedding day. Sons are supposed to respect their mothers and not use their property as if it belonged to them. I shot back, rising from my chair. Marcus paced my living room like a caged predator. This is ridiculous. Cancel that corporate event. Tell them there was a mistake, that the venue was already booked. I'm not canceling anything, Marcus. I signed a legal contract and they've paid in advance. $6,000, just so you know. $6,000. Rachel exclaimed, her eyes bulging. We'll pay you that amount and more to cancel the event. There it was, the desperate offer. The moment they finally recognized that my property had value, that my decision carried weight, that I wielded power over something they desperately needed. This isn't about money, Rachel, I said, looking directly into her eyes. It's about respect, about consideration, about asking permission before making decisions for me. Okay. Marcus shouted in exasperation. We made a mistake. We should have consulted you. But now we need your help. We're family. Family. That magical word they always deployed when they needed something from me. That enchanted phrase meant to erase all humiliations, all disrespect, all the times they had treated me like hired help in my own home. Family, I repeated slowly. The same family that appears at my house unannounced. The same family that throws parties on my property without asking. The same family that mailed 200 invitations with my address without checking if I approved. Rachel began crying with genuine tears of desperation. Please, Elena, I'm begging you. Cancel that event. We'll do whatever you want. We'll pay monthly rent for the farm. We'll help with expenses, anything you need. But please don't destroy our special day. For a moment, seeing her tears, hearing the authentic desperation in her voice, I almost weakened. For a moment, the loving mother I had always been wanted to emerge and rescue her son from this disaster. But then I remembered Marcus's exact words on the phone. I meant to mention that, but don't worry. Meant to mention. As if it were a trivial detail. As if my life, my property, my feelings were so insignificant they could be forgotten without consequences. It's too late, I finally told them. The corporate event is tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. You'll need to find another venue for your wedding. Without another word, I walked outside to the garden, leaving them alone with their desperation and disbelief. But this was just the beginning of the lesson they needed to learn. I left them in the living room screaming like angry children while I watered my plants with the tranquility of a nun in prayer. I could hear their desperate voices filtering through open windows. It's revenge, Rachel wailed. She's lost her mind. Marcus replied. We have to do something. Let's call a lawyer. This can't be legal. But no matter how loudly they screamed, no matter what threats they made, I knew something they didn't. I had every right to victory. This was my farm, purchased with my money, with the deed bearing my name. I could do exactly what I wanted with it. And what I wanted was to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. When they finally stormed out, Marcus's face was purple with rage. This isn't over, Mom, he yelled from the car. We're going to find a way to fix this mess you've created. Created? I said. I created this mess by defending my property? You created nothing by using it without permission. You better hope those corporate people don't show up tomorrow, Rachel threatened, sticking her head out the window. Because if you ruin our special day, I swear you'll never see your grandchildren again. The grandchildren the final card, the lowest emotional blackmail they could deploy. But even that didn't wound me anymore. Even that didn't frighten me. They drove away, kicking up dust clouds that soiled my freshly watered flowers. I watched them disappear down the dirt road until they vanished completely. Then I sat on my porch and wept. But these weren't tears of sadness. These were tears of relief, of liberation, of a strange happiness I hadn't felt in decades. That night I couldn't sleep for a single minute. Not from nerves or regret, but from excitement similar to what a child feels on Christmas Eve. I spent the hours walking through my house, checking every detail, imagining Marcus and Rachel's faces when they arrived tomorrow with their 200 guests, only to discover my farm occupied by executives in elegant suits. At 6 Saturday morning, I rose and took the longest bath of my life. I dressed in my most elegant burgundy dress, the one I had purchased for special occasions but never had the opportunity to wear. I carefully styled my hair, applied subtle makeup, and even wore the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. Today I would not be the same humiliated housekeeper. Today I would be Elena Morales, sole proprietor and absolute mistress of these 74 acres of blessed earth. At 8 the phone rang. My neighbor Patricia, worried about rumors spreading through town like wildfire. "Elena dear, is it true you canceled Marcus's wedding?" "I didn't cancel anything, Patricia. I simply rented my farm for another event." "Oh my goodness. But don't you feel terrible for all the people who've already confirmed?" "Feel terrible?" Everyone was discussing the shame I should feel. No one was discussing the shame they should feel for using my property without consultation. They should feel terrible for disrespecting their mother, I replied with firmness that surprised me. But everyone in town already knows about the wedding, Elena. People purchased gifts, requested time off work. Some even took vacation days to attend. Every word from Patricia stabbed at my resolve because she was right. Innocent people would be affected by my decision. For a moment I hesitated. For a moment, I considered calling Sterling and canceling the corporate event. But then I remembered something I had forgotten amid all the crisis. For 5 years since purchasing the farm, Marcus and Rachel had done exactly the same thing. They had invited people without consulting me, thrown parties without informing me, used my property as their private backyard. "Patricia," I said with certainty that came from my soul's depths, "for 5 years, I've been the uninvited hostess of my son's parties. For 5 years I've cooked for his friends, cleaned up after their celebrations, been treated like hired help in my own home. Today, for the first time, I'm going to be the owner of my own place." At 10 in the morning, the first wedding vendors began arriving. The florist appeared with his truck loaded with red roses and white carnations. But when he saw the private corporate event signage that Sterling had posted early, he stood at the entrance, utterly confused. I was on my porch enjoying morning coffee, watching the first act of the drama I had orchestrated unfold. The florist noticed me and approached with complete bewilderment. "Ma'am, I'm here to decorate for Mr. Marcus and Ms. Rachel's wedding, but I see there's another event." "Indeed," I replied with the calmest voice imaginable. "Today I have a corporate event scheduled from 2 in the afternoon. The farm is unavailable for the wedding." "But ma'am, I have a signed contract. They're paying me $4,000 for this decoration. $4,000 just for flowers for a wedding they planned without consulting me on a farm that wasn't theirs, with money they had never offered to help with property maintenance. I'm very sorry, but you'll need to speak with the contracting parties. I didn't sign any wedding contract." The caterer arrived with 2 trucks full of elegant food. The sound company arrived with massive speakers. The photographer arrived with professional cameras. One after another, every vendor discovered the same reality. The farm was occupied by another event, and the wedding would need to find another location. At 11:30, Sterling arrived with his premium corporate events team. 25 people dressed in black, moving with symphony orchestra precision. Within an hour, they transformed my garden into an elegant outdoor ballroom with round tables, white linens, sophisticated centerpieces, and a stage for corporate presentations. "Mrs. Morales," Sterling said, admiring the result, "your estate is perfect for this type of event. If you're interested, we could establish a monthly contract. We have clients who would pay handsomely for a venue this exclusive. A monthly contract. Regular income. Financial independence. For the first time in my life, my farm was not only my home but also my source of income. At noon, wedding guests began arriving. Elegant vehicles, entire families dressed formally, women in party dresses and men in dark suits, all following invitation directions that led directly to my main entrance. I was there on my porch, dressed like royalty, watching as each car stopped, confused by the corporate event signs, watching as families emerged from vehicles and looked around without understanding what was happening, watching as gradually a crowd of lost guests formed at my farm's entrance. Some approached me to ask, "Excuse me, ma'am, do you know where Marcus and Rachel's wedding is being held?" "I'm afraid it can't be held here today," I replied courteously. "The farm is rented for a corporate event." Confused faces turned to surprise, then to indignation. "But how is that possible? We received invitations with this address. You'll need to speak with the bride and groom. I'm just the property owner." At 2 o'clock, the corporate event executives arrived. 50 impeccably dressed men and women in new cars, treating me with the respect and courtesy that a successful businesswoman deserves. "Mrs. Morales, thank you so much for allowing us to use your beautiful property," the CEO told me, shaking my hand with genuine admiration. While the executives enjoyed their elegant meeting in my perfectly decorated garden, I sat on my porch awaiting the moment I had been imagining all week, the moment Marcus and Rachel would arrive in their wedding attire and discover they could no longer dispose of my life as they pleased. At 2:30 in the afternoon, just as the executives were beginning their corporate presentation in my garden, I saw a caravan of white cars decorated with silver ribbons appearing on the dirt road. My heart accelerated like a war drum. It was the wedding party, the main car with bride and groom, followed by groomsmen, bridesmaids, and several close family members. From my privileged porch position, I could perfectly observe the scene unfolding like a dramatic performance. Marcus's car stopped at the main entrance, and he emerged first, looking elegant in his black tuxedo but with a panicked expression that brutally contrasted with his formal attire. Rachel stepped out after him, and I must admit she looked beautiful in her ivory wedding gown, with that endless train and veil that had cost more than I earned in 3 months as a housekeeper. But her beauty completely vanished before the absolute horror on her face when she saw my garden's reality. 50 elegantly dressed executives occupied the round tables she had dreamed of for her wedding. A corporate presentation was being projected on the giant screen where the wedding altar should have been. The professional sound system amplified presenters' voices where promises of eternal love should have resonated. "This can't be happening," Rachel screamed with desperation that carried above the corporate murmur. "This is our day. This is our wedding." But her screams were lost in the air because the executives were completely focused on their event, oblivious to the matrimonial drama unfolding mere feet away. Marcus ran toward the house like a man possessed, his tuxedo tails flying behind him. "Mom! Mom! Get out here immediately!" he yelled from the porch's base with fury I had never seen in him. "You have to stop this right now. You have to evict these people." I slowly rose from my rocking chair, smoothed my burgundy dress, and walked to the porch railing with the dignity of a queen receiving rebellious subjects. "Good afternoon, Marcus. You look very elegant in that tuxedo." "This is no time for jokes, Mom. There are 100 guests waiting outside. The church already confirmed they can't relocate the ceremony. Rachel's entire family traveled from out of state." "What a shame," I replied with tranquility that infuriated him further. "You should have considered all that before using my property without consent. Mom, please, I'm begging you. Cancel that corporate event. Tell them there was a family emergency." Rachel ran over with her wedding dress lifted to prevent tripping, real tears streaming down her perfectly made-up cheeks. "Elena, please. I'll give you $10,000 right now. 20,000. Whatever you want, just help us. $20,000. 4 times more than the corporate company was paying me. 4 times more than they had ever offered to help with farm maintenance. Money that appeared magically only when they needed me desperately. $20,000, Rachel. I repeated slowly. Where will you get $20,000 right now? From our honeymoon savings. From money we had for a house down payment. I don't care. Just help us. It was fascinating to see money they never had to treat me as the house owner appear instantly when they needed me as a savior. The problem isn't money, I told them with firmness that surprised me. The problem is I signed a legal contract. Those executives paid me in advance and trusted my word. To hell with your word. Marcus exploded, completely losing composure. We're your family. We should be your priority. Family. That magic word they used to manipulate my emotions. That word meant to erase 40 years of ignored sacrifices. Family, I repeated with a smile I couldn't control. The same family that for 5 years has used my farm as their personal backyard. The same family that has never asked if I agree with their plans. But this is different, Mom. This is our wedding. It's the most important day of our lives. And my farm is the most important achievement of my life, I replied, walking down the porch steps one by one. For 40 years I worked to purchase it. 40 years cleaning other people's homes, enduring humiliations, saving penny after penny, and you've treated it as if it were yours. Just then Sterling, the corporate event planner, approached elegantly with a professional smile. Mrs. Morales, pardon the interruption, but we wanted to personally thank you for this extraordinary venue. The executives are delighted with the privacy and beauty of the setting. Marcus looked at him as if he were Satan himself. You need to leave immediately. This place is reserved for our wedding. Sterling looked at me confused, awaiting my explanation. Sterling, this is my son and daughter-in-law. It seems there was a misunderstanding about dates. A misunderstanding? Rachel shrieked, her voice breaking. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She rented the farm knowing perfectly well it was our wedding day. Sterling frowned, beginning to understand the family situation unfolding before his professional eyes. Mrs. Morales, he said with all possible diplomacy, if there's a family conflict, we could consider relocating our event to. There's no conflict, I interrupted firmly. You have a signed and paid contract. Your event continues exactly as planned. Sterling's face showed respect and admiration. In the business world, given word and signed contracts were sacred. Perfect, Mrs. Morales. It's a pleasure conducting business with such a professional person. He walked away back to his event, leaving us alone with family tension that cut the air like a knife. Marcus stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and something that looked dangerously like fear. For the first time in his life, he was seeing his mother as something more than the family's housekeeper. For the first time he was understanding that I had power, my own will, and the ability to say no. What are we going to do with all the guests? Rachel asked in a broken whisper. What are we going to tell them? How are we going to explain that grandmother canceled the wedding? I didn't cancel anything, I clarified for the 100th time. You organized a wedding on someone else's property without consulting the owner. At that moment, more guest cars began arriving. Entire families emerging confused. Children dressed up running around the parking area. Grandparents with canes wondering where the ceremony was. The chaos multiplied exponentially with every passing minute. I stood right there in the hurricane's eye, feeling more powerful and more in control of my destiny than I had ever felt in my 70 years of life. But what Marcus and Rachel didn't know was that this was just the beginning of the lesson they needed to learn about respect, consideration, and the consequences of treating their mother like hired help. The situation became more chaotic with every passing minute. Wedding guests crowded at my farm's entrance like a confused mob. Some indignant, others worried. All without understanding what was happening with the ceremony they had come to witness. Voices rose in English, Spanish, and even French, because Rachel's family was international, and people had traveled thousands of miles to attend this special day. But where is the wedding? Asked an elderly lady with a French accent, dressed in an elegant pink suit. Why are there businesspeople where the altar should be? A group of Marcus's cousins argued among themselves, some blaming the bride and groom for disorganization, others seeking logical explanations for the inexplicable. Rachel ran from group to group like a headless chicken, trying to explain the inexplicable with her wedding dress dragging in my garden dirt. "It's a horrible misunderstanding," she would say, her voice breaking. "My mother-in-law had a problem with dates. We're trying to resolve it." But each explanation sounded more desperate than the last. Marcus, meanwhile, had completely lost the elegant composure a groom should have on his wedding day. His hair was disheveled, his tie crooked, and he paced back and forth like a caged lion, talking on the phone with pitiful desperation. "I need a venue for 200 guests now. I don't care about the price. It's a family emergency." But it was Saturday afternoon, and all event halls, hotels, and elegant restaurants already had their own celebrations scheduled. No one could accommodate 200 guests at the last minute, especially not for a complete ceremony with decorations, sound, and catering. Meanwhile, I remained on my porch as privileged spectator to the most satisfying performance of my life. The corporate event executives continued their meeting, completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding feet away, focused on their business presentations and professional networking. Occasionally, a wedding guest would approach me directly to ask what was happening. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you know where the ceremony will be held?" "I'm afraid you'll need to ask the bride and groom," I would reply with the most polite courtesy. "I'm only the farm owner, and today it's rented for a corporate event." The look of confusion on each person's face was a masterpiece. They couldn't understand how the groom's grandmother could know nothing about her own son's wedding. They couldn't understand how it was possible that there was another event in the same place on the same date. They understood nothing. And that confusion was exactly what I had planned. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Father Michael, the priest who was to officiate the ceremony, arrived. He was an elderly man about 65, with that infinite patience priests develop after decades of handling family dramas. He emerged from his black car, saw the chaos, approached Marcus directly, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, explain to me what's happening here." Marcus completely broke down in Father Michael's presence. It was as if the figure of religious authority made him revert to the Catholic boy. He had been the boy who didn't dare lie in confession. "Father, my mom rented the farm for another event. We didn't know. We didn't ask her." Father Michael looked at me with those wise eyes that have seen everything in life. He walked slowly to my porch, climbed the stairs, and sat in the rocking chair beside mine. "Elena, correct? I'm Father Michael. May we talk for a moment?" "Of course, Father." I liked his approach. He didn't come shouting or demanding like Marcus and Rachel. He didn't try to manipulate me emotionally. He simply wanted to understand the situation from my perspective. "Tell me what happened here," he said with that quiet voice confessors use. I explained everything from the beginning. The 40 years of work, the 5 years of being treated like hired help on my own farm, the parties without invitation, the wedding plan without consulting me, the 200 invitations sent with my address without my knowledge. I told him everything with the honesty owed to a man of God. Father Michael listened in silence, nodding occasionally, without judging them or me. When I finished speaking, he remained quiet for several minutes, looking at the garden where executives were enjoying their corporate event, while wedding guests remained confused in the parking area. "I understand your pain, Elena," he finally told me, "and I understand that you feel disrespected. But I also understand that there are 200 innocent people who came with the best intention of celebrating your son's love. Father, I didn't create this situation. I only defended my property. I know, my dear, and you have every right to defend what's yours. But now we must think about how to resolve this in the most Christian way possible." I liked that he didn't judge me, but I also didn't like the implication that I should be the one to solve the problem others had created. "What do you suggest, Father?" "Well, the corporate event is already established and you have a legal contract. We can't interrupt that. But perhaps we could use the area in front of the house for a small ceremony, just with closest family, and then find a restaurant for the celebration." It was a reasonable proposal, I must admit, but there was a problem. Accepting that proposal would mean rescuing Marcus and Rachel from the consequences of their own decisions. It would mean teaching them they could disrespect their mother because in the end she would always rescue them. "Father, I said, looking directly into his eyes. For 5 years, I've rescued my son from the consequences of his decisions. I've cleaned up after his parties. I've cooked for his friends. I've allowed him to treat my house as if it were his. And every time I rescue him, he learns he can do whatever he wants because Mom will always be there to fix the mess. Father Michael nodded slowly. He was a wise man and perfectly understood the moral dilemma I faced. And what do you think should happen now? I think my son needs to learn that decisions have consequences. That he can't use other people's property without permission. Not even if that person is his mother. At that moment, Rachel ran toward the porch with her wedding dress dirty from dirt and tears streaming down her cheeks. Father Michael, thank God you're here. Please help us. Elena has to understand this is our special day. The father looked at her with compassion, but also with that firmness characterizing good priests. Rachel, my dear, before we discuss special days, we need to discuss respect and consideration for others. It's true you planned this wedding without consulting Mrs. Elena. Rachel fell silent with her mouth open, not knowing what to say, because the truth was indefensible, and she knew it. It's just that we thought she was family. We didn't think it was necessary. You didn't think it was necessary to ask the owner if you could use her property. The priest insisted with that infinite patience that disarms more than any shouting. But we've always used the farm for our celebrations, Rachel exclaimed desperately. There's never been a problem before. That's the problem, my dear, Father Michael replied. The fact there's never been a problem doesn't mean there hasn't been a lack of respect. At that moment, seeing Rachel's face confronting truth before a man of God, I knew someone else finally understood my perspective. Someone else saw what I had been feeling for 5 years, being treated like hired help in my own house. But the lesson was just beginning. Father Michael stayed with us for a full hour, mediating between the bride and groom's desperation and my unshakable determination. It was like a spiritual referee in the strangest ring in the world, a 70-year-old grandmother against her own son on his wedding day. But while we were talking, something incredible began happening. The corporate event executives began noticing the drama unfolding feet from their professional meeting. At first, they tried to politely ignore it, but it was impossible not to see a bride in white dress crying uncontrollably, while 200 confused guests filled my farm's parking area. Sterling discreetly approached where we were. Mrs. Morales, I apologize for interrupting again, but my clients are asking if they can help in any way. They see the family situation and feel uncomfortable occupying the venue on such an important day. For the first time since all this chaos began, I felt a pang of something akin to regret. These elegant professional executives were showing more consideration for an unknown family than my own son had shown me for 5 years. That's very kind of you, Sterling, but you have a paid and planned event. You shouldn't worry about our family matters. Well, if you change your mind, we'll be here until 6 this evening. After that, the venue is completely available. 6 this evening. That meant they could technically have some kind of nocturnal celebration after the executives left. It was a possibility I hadn't considered, and I saw Rachel's eyes light up with desperate hope when she heard those words. Did you hear that, Elena? She asked, her voice broken but hopeful. We could have the ceremony after 6. We could have a candlelit evening wedding. It would be even more romantic. Rachel, I replied gently, the problem isn't the schedule. The problem is you never asked my permission to use my property. Marcus then approached, and for the first time since this entire crisis began, he didn't have fury on his face, but something that looked dangerously like humility. Mom, he said in a voice I hadn't heard since he was a child, you're right. We made a horrible mistake. We disrespected you in the worst possible way. I remained silent, waiting to see if there was more than a superficial apology dictated by desperation. We should never have taken for granted that we could use your farm without asking. We should never have sent invitations with your address without consulting you. And we should never have treated you as if you were our employee instead of treating you as the house owner you are. His words sounded sincere, but I had heard apologies before. Whenever he needed something from me, Marcus knew exactly what to say to soften my maternal heart. And what will you do differently if I give you another chance? I asked directly. We'll pay monthly rent for using the farm on weekends, he replied immediately. We'll consult you before making any plans involving your property, and we'll treat you with the respect you deserve as our mother and as the owner of this house. Monthly rent, prior consultations, respect as house owner, all the things I had wanted for 5 years, appearing magically only when they needed me desperately. How much monthly rent? I asked, more from curiosity than real interest. $1,500 a month, he replied without hesitation. And we'd handle all maintenance expenses, gardening, repairs, utilities whenever we're here. $1,500 monthly plus expenses. $18,000 annually that they had never offered before, appearing as if by magic when they needed me. Rachel then approached and knelt before my rocking chair with her wedding dress spread over the porch planks like a white cloud. Elena, please, I swear to God we will never disrespect you again. I swear you'll be treated like the queen of this house as you deserve. It was a powerful image. The daughter-in-law who had treated me like hired help for 5 years, kneeling before me in her wedding dress, begging forgiveness. It was the validation I had been waiting for decades without even knowing it. But I also knew something they didn't. Promises made in moments of desperation are rarely kept when the crisis passes. The $1,500 monthly would become, "This month is tight, Mom." The prior consultations would become, "We forgot to mention it." The respect as house queen would become, "Mom, could you make something to eat?" "Stand up, Rachel," I told her gently. "You don't need to kneel before me. You just need to respect me." She rose with tears of hope streaming down her cheeks. "Does that mean you're going to help us?" At that moment I looked around my farm. The distinguished executives enjoying their professional event. The 200 wedding guests waiting for some solution in the parking area. My son and daughter-in-law in their formal wear. Humiliated but finally understanding my property's value and my opinion. For the first time in 5 years, maybe for the first time in my life, I held all the power in the situation. I decided what happened next. I was the absolute master of my destiny and everyone else's destiny in that moment. Father Michael looked at me with those wise eyes that have seen thousands of family dramas. "What does your heart say, Elena?" "My heart says many different things, Father. It says I love my son and want to see him happy. But it also says I'm tired of being treated like hired help in my own house. Both things can be true simultaneously," he replied with that wisdom coming only from years of counseling broken families. "The question is, how do you find the balance between love and respect?" It was the million-dollar question, literally, because there were thousands of dollars monthly waiting for my answer. There was an entire wedding waiting for my decision. There were 200 people waiting to know if they would witness a ceremony or a family disaster. While everyone waited for my answer, a completely new idea began forming in my mind. An idea no one had considered, not even myself until that moment. An idea that would change everything forever. The idea forming in my mind was so simple and perfect that I was surprised I hadn't thought of it earlier. I slowly rose from my rocking chair, walked to the porch edge, and looked at everyone waiting for my decision. Marcus in his wrinkled tuxedo. Rachel with her wedding dress dirty from dirt. Father Michael with his infinite patience. The 200 confused guests. And the executives trying to focus on their meeting despite the family drama. "You're right," I finally said in a voice that sounded stronger than expected. "There are 200 innocent people who came with good intentions to celebrate your love. And it's true they deserve to witness a ceremony, not a family disaster." Rachel's eyes shone with renewed hope. "Does that mean you're going to help us?" "It means I'm going to do something better than help you," I replied with a smile coming from my soul. "I'm going to teach you how to organize an event the right way." I walked over to where Sterling was, who was observing everything with the professional fascination of someone who handles event crises daily. "Sterling, how much time would your clients need to finish their meeting if we offered them incentives to expedite the process?" Sterling looked at me with genuine surprise. "What kind of incentives, Mrs. Morales?" "A 50% discount on the rental and an invitation to stay and witness a very exclusive improvised wedding." Sterling's face lit up as if he had discovered gold. Mrs. Morales, that would be extraordinary for my company. A corporate event followed immediately by an intimate wedding would be the kind of versatility that would put us on the business map. How much time do you need? With those incentives, they could finish by 4:30. I turned to Marcus and Rachel, who were looking at me without completely understanding what I was planning. Here's my proposal, I told them with the authority of someone who has finally taken control of their own life. The religious ceremony will be held here on my farm after 4:30 in the afternoon. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus shouted, trying to hug me, but I raised my hand to stop him. I'm not finished. The ceremony will be held under my conditions, with my rules, and in the way I deem appropriate. The silence that followed was so dense you could slice it with scissors. Everyone knew I was about to dictate terms, and no one knew if those terms would be acceptable or unacceptable. What are your conditions, Mom? Marcus asked with a mixture of gratitude and nervousness. First condition. From this moment forward and forever, any event you want to hold on my property must be consulted with me at least 1 month in advance. Second condition. You will pay $1,500 monthly rent for farm use on weekends, plus all maintenance expenses. So far, everything aligned with what they had promised in their desperation. Third condition. During today's ceremony, I will be publicly recognized as the owner and hostess of this place. Fourth condition. After the ceremony, all guests will know the complete story of how this wedding was organized. I watched Marcus and Rachel's faces gradually change from hope to concern. What do you mean by they will know the complete story? Rachel asked in a small voice. I mean that during the toast I am going to explain exactly how we reached this situation, how 200 invitations were sent without consulting the property owner, how a complete wedding was planned without my knowledge, and how everything was almost canceled because no one thought it necessary to ask my permission. The look of absolute horror on their faces was almost comical. It was obvious they would prefer any punishment to public humiliation before all their family and friends. Mom, you can't do that to us, Marcus murmured. Rachel's family, our friends, everyone will think we're disrespectful. And weren't you? I asked with devastating simplicity. Weren't you disrespectful by using my property without consent? Am I not the one who should feel humiliated for being treated like hired help in my own house? Father Michael cleared his throat. Elena, I understand your point, but public humiliation can permanently damage family relationships. Father, with all due respect, I replied, looking directly into his eyes. Disrespect toward parents also permanently damages family relationships. The difference is my humiliation has been private for 5 years, while theirs would be public for 5 minutes. It was unassailable logic, and Father Michael knew it. He nodded slowly, acknowledging I had a valid point. What if we accept all your conditions? Rachel asked, her voice breaking. Including the public toast? Including the public toast? Rachel and Marcus looked at each other with that silent communication couples have when facing difficult decisions. I could see them calculating mentally. It was better to have a wedding with public humiliation or no wedding at all. Is there no way to negotiate the toast part? Marcus asked desperately. We could do everything else. Pay the rent, always consult you, recognize you as hostess, but avoid the public speech. No, I replied with firmness that surprised me. You either accept all my conditions, or you can find another venue for your ceremony. It was the moment of truth. The moment they had to decide if their pride was more important than their wedding. The moment they had to choose between temporary humiliation and complete loss of their special day. Rachel was the first to break. Tears began rolling down her cheeks as she nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. We accept all your conditions, all of them, including the toast. Marcus looked at her in surprise, then looked at me, and finally he also nodded. Okay, Mom. We accept. At that moment, I felt something I had never felt in my life. Absolute power mixed with poetic justice. It wasn't cruel revenge. It wasn't gratuitous malice. It was simply the natural consequences of their own decisions presented in a way everyone could learn the lesson. Perfect. I told them with a smile coming from the depths of my satisfaction. Sterling, please proceed to discuss expediting the event with your clients. Father Michael, we'll need to reorganize the ceremony for 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Marcus, go inform all guests that the wedding will take place, but with a modified schedule. The organization machinery was immediately set in motion. Sterling ran to speak with the executives, who received the news with professional enthusiasm and personal curiosity. Father Michael began calculating times for the modified ceremony. Guests began receiving information that there would be a wedding, just later than planned. I sat on my porch watching as my farm became the setting for a wedding that would finally take place on my terms, with my rules, and with public recognition that this property had a name and surname, Elena Morales. But the best part was yet to come. The part where all guests would know the complete story of how a 70-year-old grandmother taught her son and daughter-in-law that respect is non-negotiable, consideration is not optional, and mothers also have dignity. The best part was the toast. I was mentally preparing the speech that would be remembered for decades in all future family gatherings. At 5:30 in the afternoon, my farm was transformed into something I had never imagined. The executives had kept their word and finished their event on time, but most had stayed as special guests, fascinated by the idea of witnessing a family wedding after their business meeting. It was like having two events in one, and the mix of corporate elegance with family drama created a unique atmosphere. Rachel looked beautiful despite all the day's stress. Her wedding dress, although slightly dirty from her desperate running, was still spectacular under the golden sunset light. Marcus had managed to fix his hair and straighten his tie, regaining some of the elegance a groom should have on his big day. The 200 guests were finally seated, although in a completely different configuration than originally planned. Corporate chairs were mixed with wedding chairs, creating an improvised but functional arrangement. The altar was set up under my favorite apple tree, the same tree I had planted with my own hands 3 years ago. Father Michael, with that adaptability priests develop after decades of unexpected ceremonies, had managed to create a solemn and beautiful atmosphere despite the extraordinary circumstances. His voice resonated clear and strong as he read the marriage vows that would unite my son and daughter-in-law for life. But while I listened to promises of eternal love, I was focused on the moment that would come after the toast. The moment when the entire family, all friends, all guests would know the complete story of how we had reached this point. When Father Michael pronounced the final words, "You may kiss as husband and wife," the applause was deafening. 200 people celebrating triumphant love. Corporate executives mingling with emotional family members. An explosion of joy that filled my garden with wonderful energy. Sterling then approached with a champagne glass in his hand and a wireless microphone. "Mrs. Morales, it's time for your toast as hostess." My heart began beating faster. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment of absolute truth. I slowly rose, took the microphone with hands that no longer trembled, and walked to the center where everyone could see me perfectly. The silence gradually spread until 200 people were looking at me expectantly, waiting for the emotional words the groom's mother typically says at these moments. "Good evening, everyone." I began with a voice that sounded stronger and more confident than it ever had. "I'm Elena Morales, Marcus's mother and the owner of this beautiful farm where we're celebrating today." The applause was immediate and warm. So far, everything sounded completely normal. "I want to thank you all for joining us on this very special day, although I must confess I found out there would be a wedding here in exactly the same way you did by invitation." A murmur of confusion began spreading among guests. Some people looked at each other without completely understanding what I had said. "You see, my son and daughter-in-law sent 200 invitations with my farm's address without consulting me if I agreed to have a wedding here." The murmur turned into absolute silence. All eyes alternated between the bride and groom, who had faces red with shame, and me, who continued speaking with unshakable serenity. I discovered this on Tuesday morning when the florist called to coordinate decorations. Imagine my surprise to discover my property had been committed for an event I didn't know existed. The corporate executives who had witnessed all afternoon's drama began smiling with admiration. They recognized a businesswoman defending her rights. For 40 years, I worked as a housekeeper to purchase this farm. 40 years cleaning other people's houses, saving penny after penny, dreaming of having a place of my own where I could live with dignity in my golden years. My voice cracked slightly, but I continued. And for the 5 years I've lived here, I've been treated as hired help on my own property. The silence was so profound you could hear wind moving tree leaves. No one expected this kind of speech at a wedding, but everyone was completely captivated by the story unfolding before their eyes. When I discovered what had happened, I made a decision. I rented my farm for a corporate event on the same day as the wedding to teach my son and daughter-in-law that this property has an owner, and that owner is me. Several guests began nodding in approval. The story was starting to make sense to everyone. But at day's end, family love is stronger than wounded pride. And although it was necessary to go to this extreme to gain the respect I deserve, here we are celebrating Marcus and Rachel's love in my house, on my terms with my rules. The applause that followed was different from the previous one. It was applause of admiration, recognition, genuine respect for a woman who had defended her dignity. So I toast to the bride and groom, who today learned that respect for parents is not optional, that consideration for others is fundamental, and that mothers also have rights and feelings. I raised my champagne glass, and the entire crowd did the same. To Marcus and Rachel, may they begin their marriage understanding the value of mutual respect. The applause that followed was thunderous. 200 people celebrating not only a wedding but a life lesson masterfully imparted. The corporate executives applauded with professional admiration. Older family members nodded in approval. Even young friends seemed to understand they had witnessed something extraordinary. Marcus then approached with tears in his eyes and hugged me before the entire crowd. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Sorry it took us so long to understand." Rachel came after, her wedding dress dirty and her tears of shame mixed with tears of gratitude. "Thank you for saving the wedding despite everything, Elena. We will never forget this lesson." The rest of the celebration was magical. Guests constantly approached to congratulate me, not only on my son's wedding, but on how I had handled the situation. "What a brave woman," Rachel's French grandmother said to me. "I wish more mothers had your character. You taught them a lesson they'll never forget," one of Marcus's uncles commented. The corporate executives integrated perfectly into the family party, exchanging business cards and discussing future events on my farm. Sterling sought me out before leaving. "Mrs. Morales, after what I witnessed today, I want to offer you an exclusive contract. Your farm and your personality are exactly what our most demanding clients seek." When everyone was gone and I was left alone, cleaning up the last details, I sat on my porch and looked at stars beginning to appear in the night sky. In my hands, I held two things I hadn't had when I woke that morning: a contract to turn my farm into a prosperous business and the absolute respect of my family. But the most important thing I had was something that couldn't be touched or measured: the certainty that I would never again allow anyone, not even my own son, to treat me as less than I am. The certainty that Elena Morales was not just the self-sacrificing mother, not just the complacent grandmother, not just the family's housekeeper. Elena Morales was the owner of her own destiny, the mistress of her own house, the author of her own story. And that story had just begun, the most beautiful chapter of all, the chapter where I finally respected myself enough to demand that others respect me too. At 70 years old, I had learned the most important lesson of my life: that love without respect is not true love, and that teaching respect, even when painful, is the greatest gift a mother can give her children. 6 months have passed since the most talked about wedding in town, and my life has changed in ways I never imagined. Every morning, I wake on my farm with a feeling I didn't know before, the feeling of being completely in control of my own existence. The events business has flourished beyond my wildest dreams. Sterling kept his promise, and my farm has become the region's most exclusive venue for elegant weddings and corporate meetings. Every weekend I receive between $4,000 and $7,000 for renting my property. Money that has given me financial independence I never had, not even when working double shifts as a housekeeper. But the most beautiful thing isn't the money. The most beautiful thing is the respect. Marcus and Rachel have religiously kept their promise. Every month they deposit the $1,500 rent on time, and they have never, not once, appeared without consulting me first. When they want to use the farm for family celebrations, they call weeks in advance, politely ask if the date is available, and wait for my answer without taking anything for granted. The first time they did this, 4 months ago, I almost cried with emotion. Marcus called one Thursday afternoon. "Mom, could you check your calendar? We want to celebrate Rachel's birthday at the farm next Saturday. If that's okay with you." If that's okay with you. Words I had waited 5 years to hear. But the most profound change has been in how they treat me when they're here. I am no longer the housekeeper who prepares food and cleans up after parties. Now I am the respected hostess, the house owner, who sits at the table's head while they take care of serving and cleaning. The first time Rachel insisted on washing dishes after a family dinner, I was so surprised I didn't know what to do. "Elena, you worked enough preparing this delicious meal. We'll handle cleanup." It was like living in a parallel world where I was finally treated as the matriarch I always should have been. The grandchildren, of course, still visit me. Rachel never carried out her threat to keep them away. And now I understand why. Children need their grandmother as much as I need them. But even the relationship with them has improved because now they see me as the powerful grandmother who demanded respect, not as the submissive grandmother who always gave in to everything. The entire town knows my story. For months, I was the topic of conversation at the market, at church, everywhere. Some women would seek me out to tell their own stories of family disrespect. "Elena, how did you find the courage to stand up for yourself?" My neighbor Patricia would ask every time we met. My answer is always the same. I didn't find courage. I built it day by day, every time I decided I deserved something better. And it's true. It wasn't a moment of sudden bravery. It was years of accumulated humiliations until I finally said enough. I have received 4 marriage proposals from widowers in town who were impressed with my strong character and financial independence. I politely thanked them but explained that at 70 years old, I finally learned to be happy with myself, and I wouldn't trade that happiness for anything. My farm has become a symbol in town. Young women come to see me asking for advice on how to set boundaries with their families. Older mothers tell me how they used my story to teach their adult children respect. Even Father Michael mentions my case in his sermons about the honor we owe our parents. Sterling's corporate event business has become a prosperous partnership. I now have events scheduled until the year's end, and the waiting list to rent my farm is 4 months long. Major companies, wealthy families, even regional celebrities have discovered this little paradise I built with 40 years of sweat and tears. But every night when guests leave and lights go out, I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee and look at stars with satisfaction I didn't know before. It's not just the satisfaction of money earned or respect conquered. It's the profound satisfaction of knowing I am finally who I always should have been. I am no longer Elena the housekeeper. I am no longer Elena the self-sacrificing mother who suffers in silence. I am no longer Elena the compliant grandmother who accepts anything to avoid conflict. Now I am Elena Morales, successful businesswoman, respected matriarch. A woman who stood up for herself when it seemed too late to change things. Elena who taught her children that true love includes respect, and that respect is not begged for, it is demanded. Every night before falling asleep, I whisper a small prayer of thanks. Not for the wedding that almost got canceled, not for the conflict that nearly destroyed the family, but for having had the courage at 70 years old to write the ending of my own story instead of letting others write it for me. Because it's never too late to start respecting yourself. And it's never too late to teach others how they should treat us. This is my story. This is my victory. This is my life finally lived on my own terms. If this story resonated with you, if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect regardless of age, please consider subscribing for more inspiring stories of people who found the courage to stand up for themselves.